I am so glad you convinced me that the family car should be the Defender 110. It is so beautiful inside. It's so comfortable, and it just feels indestructible.
Yes, it really is. I've been waiting a long time for the new model to come out. The Defender 110, I'm telling you, it's my favorite car of all times. It's my third one. You know, I have stories of going off-road. The guy managed the group. He was like, what are you doing in this beautiful car? I'm like, I'm going off-road. He's like, are you sure? Because you can use one of ours. And then they look like Mad Max cars. I'm like, no, we're going to do this. And he was shocked.
Wow. Well, it's great because the Defender has been reimagined for 21st century adventure, and its unparalleled off-road ability, as well as its robust interior, are invaluable whether you're headed towards uncharted territory or just a weekend of exploration. The Defender 110 tackles challenging surroundings with absolute confidence. The SUV conveys strength outside and in, featuring peerless technology like an intuitive driver display and an award-winning infotainment system. That's my favorite part, to keep you connected no matter where the journey takes you. Adventure is unique to everyone, and so is the Defender. Choose from the two-door Defender 90, the four-door Defender 110, or the larger Defender 130 with the ability to seat up to 8 passengers. You'll find uncompromising performance in all three. So pack up and go even further with the Defender 110. Learn more at LandRoverUSA.com/Defender.
These days, we're all investors, trying to be smart with our money despite our worst impulses. But at iShares, we believe that deep down inside of every investor is a better investor. One that's just waiting to be let out. Explore iShares ETFs and insights and let your best investor out. Visit iShares.com for more information.
This isn't your average business podcast, and he's not your average host. This is the James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network. Today on the James Altucher Show.
Here's the big thing: emotional intelligence.
You know what's really funny? Like, I think I'm actually at the least emotionally intelligent point of my life in a weird way.
Why?
I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like I've read a lot about it. I go to therapy. I do, for years and years, I write about my vulnerabilities. And I think maybe just writing about that, I realize I have more vulnerabilities than I've ever had before. So
no, you always had. It's not like you're writing about them as making them up, dude.
Right?
You just don't recognize.
That's just it. But now I'm just recognizing them more than ever.
That's not a bad thing. Why is that a bad thing?
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I guess it's just more things that make me anxious in life. So, I've added to my neuroses when I wake up in the morning. We all wake up with like a certain set of neuroses, and then we kind of knock them down as we get out of bed. But I don't.
You know the saying: when you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah, right.
You come out the other end, dude. I mean, first of all, everything in life goes in cycles, and for me, it always feels like the hardest part is always right before the best part. It's almost always the way it works, man. Like, I can't tell you how hard it was for me to navigate the emotional waters of recognizing that I had hired the wrong person to run my company, that it was my fault. It really was. And swallowing that, and then swallowing that because of that, I needed to put the right, and I had the right person in my orbit, and I had to get him in my company, and I had to step aside for him because I wasn't good enough to do that job. And I'm sure something like this will happen again in my life. But that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing, is that the same thing happened, right? The same thing that happened that screwed up my movie happened in my company. This time, I recognized it early enough to see what I was doing and make the right decision.
So I've got Tucker Max once again on the podcast. You were on my very first podcast.
I was your first guest.
Yeah, you were the first guest. And now the latest podcast,
yes.
obviously.
What episode is like 230, 240?
Yeah, something like that. So
that's a lot. That's
I
good.
know. I feel like I didn't know how many episodes I would do when I first started, or what this podcast thing was. But I feel like I just keep going, and it's
well, you
doing
love it.
pretty well.
You can tell. Like
Yeah.
I was listening to your one with Tony Robbins was good. The one I actually really liked was Anders Ericsson.
Oh yeah, he's good.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is like his stuff is great. He's terrible at explaining it. So like, what was so good about your podcast episode with him is like you actually explained his stuff better than he does.
Yeah, I think his publicists were like sitting outside. I think they
Right.
were very relieved after the podcast that it was his word was able to get out there.
Yeah, you can tell he's like one of those academics that like he doesn't. Like, you can tell why no one knew who he was until Malcolm Gladwell wrote about him. Even though he's this brilliant dude who did all of the research that Malcolm Gladwell is famous for and screwed up. This dude, like, it's so weird. It was like he would say something and I'd be like, wait, what did he say? And then you would restate it in a way it's like, oh, of course, obvious. But, like, you can tell, like, you really like it, man.
Well, it's funny because then I've had on a lot of guests who are also trying to achieve peak performance in their lives.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, did you call or talk to Anders? And they've all talked to Anders Ericsson. Like, he's the guru of all these people who are trying to achieve peak performance.
He's the guy who did the research.
Yeah.
Like, he's demonstrated a practice research, all of that sort of stuff. He's the one who gets it.
But, you know, now this might sound crazy to many people who know you from your initial books, but you're someone who I view as always trying to achieve peak performance in everything you do.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, I hope they serve beer in hell. Assholes finish first. Sloppy seconds. What was the third book? That was Sloppy seconds was the
Hilarity
fourth book.
ensues.
Hilarity ensues. So these are all like great, well-written books. People just think they're like funny stories, but you can see they're like it's good, great writing.
Yeah.
And now, of course, you've morphed that. I mean, there's a big middle space there, but you've morphed that into creating a company about helping other people publish their own books, which we'll get to. But in terms of learning skills and peak performance, how do you think you became like a great, like, again, it'll frustrate you. It's frustrated you, I know, in the past. People won't say that's great writing, but it is actually like good, honest
frustrate
writing.
me a lot. Yeah.
But you can see there's like an honesty there. And you know, all the stories are self-deprecating. It's not like you bragging in these books. It's like you're saying you're an asshole in the books.
Right, of course.
So,
well, I mean, the thing, we're 10 years out now from the first or the publish of Beer in Hell. And like the thing that like is funny is everyone's everyone does this, anyone could write this, whatever. 10 years, no man that I know of has written anything close or done anything close. Can you think of anyone?
no, and
There's a whole line of female comics who've done kind of similar things.
yeah. I mean,
No men.
what about what's the guy's
I
name?
mean, in writing, I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I'm trying to think of maybe one guy like in fiction, Chad Hurtgen.
Colchin.
Yeah.
He sold like 50,000 books. No.
Yeah.
No,
I think
nothing.
he's a decent writer though, but their novels they didn't sell so well.
Right, exactly. So no one's done anything close. And so think about how crazy that is. I basically wrote about what everyone does. Drink, hook up, fall down, act stupid, right? And no one has been able to replicate or duplicate or imitate it at all.
So there's two things I want to unpack there. One is it reminds me of Hunter S. Thompson because he's got a very distinctive, honest style as well, and a lot of imitators. And the imitators don't understand what he does, so they're imitating the wrong thing. What they're doing is they're getting drunk and then writing about it, or they're taking drugs and then writing about it in this crazy way, but they don't understand he's actually a writer first and then kind of like this crazy maniac second. And so what do you think, what's and I view your style actually as similar to Hunter S. Thompson. So I don't know if he was an influence on you or what.
I actually hadn't read really any of his stuff when I started writing. I swear to God.
So it's interesting because I feel there's a certain a certain honesty and authenticity in the writing, which maybe is true for all good writing. But what do you think is what's the skill? How do you get to be a good writer?
Yeah. So it's funny. The first question you asked was like, how do I get peak performance? How do I improve? I think the answer to that question and this question is the same. So always in my life, one of the things that I've always been willing to do is honestly look at myself and honestly evaluate kind of who I am and what I am. And of course, there are many times when I've failed at that, when I tried to be honest and like I just couldn't see something I didn't want to see or whatever. But it's almost like a recursive loop in my head. It's like I can't not do it. I've got to evaluate myself starkly honestly and see, am I what I think I am? Am I who I want to be? Am I good at this or not? And if I'm not, if it's something I care about and I'm not good at it, then I'm always willing to put in the work. Like, what am I not doing? What do I need to do differently?
So how do you know? It's very hard to self-evaluate because we have this tendency to smoke crack about
our own
ourselves.
crack, yeah.
Right. So like I know thousands of people who write and they write me and say, "Oh, I just wrote something. I think you'd like it. Here's the link."
Yeah.
And I look at it and it's just
Garbage.
yeah, it's either garbage or it's the same thing everyone else is writing. There's no unique voice,
Yeah.
and so people don't really know how to evaluate whether they're good or bad.
Well, it's a great point. So those people are not writing to write. They're not trying to improve their writing. What they're trying to do is get attention, right? And so that's a totally different thing. And I never was focused early in my writing at getting attention. I started, in fact, I never even self-identified as a writer. This is a key thing, is what is your identity, right? I always kept my identity very small with writing. And so when I started writing, I was writing emails for my friends. And my only goal, my only measurement for whether the emails were good or not is, did those 9 guys think it was funny? And if they did, it was good. And if they didn't, it was bad. And that's it. There was no arguing, right? And it was easy for me to do that because I didn't define myself as a writer. So if they said it was bad, it didn't wound me. It was just this thing I did,
So
right?
it
was
wouldn't
external.
It wouldn't have stopped you. Like you didn't have your identity wrapped up
Exactly.
in it.
Whereas the people who are sending you stuff, they don't care about writing. They care about the image in their head of writer. They want to be a writer. They want to be Hemingway. They want to be, you're successful enough now. I see a lot of people, this is exactly what you said, who are writing in what I call Altucher style, which is like, I'm going to dump my soul on the page in the most raw, crazy way possible.
And they also fail at it. Like
they do terrible.
Right.
It's awful. It's unreadable.
They're somehow, they miss the mark.
Because I'll tell you why. Because when you do it, it comes from a place where you started writing essentially as therapy for yourself, right? Like you were either going to write or you were going to die. That was your thing. And you have kept that kind of manic edge in 90+% of your writing. Like I think about who intentionally reads someone else's Facebook stuff? Like no one. I would never.
Right.
You're one of the only people who, when you put something on Facebook, I actually read it because almost all of it still has that manic energy. Those people are not writing for that reason. They're writing because they want their narcissistic supply. They want someone to tell them that they are important or valid because of their writing. And so they're just trying to find a way to get an output. They're not worried about the input. You're worried about input. I'm worried about input. That's why we succeed. Everyone you want to look at, if you want to boil it down to one thing, a binary thing, people who succeed worry about input. People who don't succeed are worried about output.
Okay, so let me understand a little bit more about what do you mean by input?
I mean like the work you're doing, right? So if you want to produce great writing, the only way to do that is to worry about the act of writing. What am I trying to say? How am I saying it? Who is my audience? Those sorts of things, right? If you're worried about, but most people with writing think about, they look at my stuff, for example, and they'll say, oh, well, I get drunk, I fall down, I yell curses, I'm going to write really arrogant things about that, and then I'll be just like, I'll get the same attention Tucker Max gets, right? But none of that ever worked. No one has ever replicated anything I did because of exactly what you said. They looked at the surface things and they just replicated those things. They didn't actually understand the underlying underlying input. The input was I was opening my soul in a very entertaining, funny way for people. You open your soul in a way that is very engaging and motivating and inspiring and almost awe-inspiring in your vulnerability, right? They're totally different, but people stop because we help them understand things about themselves and feel things they want to feel and either escape or be inspired, right? Those other people aren't doing that. They just want the result of that, right? They want the output of that vulnerability in that work. They don't want to actually put in the input. It's like, I think Mark Cuban's famous saying, everyone wants to be a star. No one wants to put in the work necessary to be a star. You do, and I do, and all the successful people do.
And it's hard work. Like, again, you think, so I mean, you've sold millions of copies of your books, and I think what people are missing when they say, oh, I've gotten drunk, I've, hooked up, I've said curses, I could write about this. What they're missing is like what you say, the vulnerability, because that's not what your stories are about. They're about this vulnerability and you tell some like scary stuff about yourself that people are afraid to admit.
Yeah.
They just want to admit kind of
That's everyone's second question to me. Do your parents know?
Right. Well, like people. I feel like people who mimic you want to brag, whereas you're actually putting yourself down. And
well, I'm doing both.
Well, there's authenticity and then there's storytelling. So you have the authenticity, which is very hard to do, and then there's also a story. Like, there's the arc of a story in there, which I don't know if you instinctively knew or had to learn that. Or
yeah, storytelling is actually fairly easy craft to learn. That's something you can learn with. It's funny I brought up Anders. That's something you can really absolutely learn with just a little bit of deliberate practice. It does not. I don't think it takes that much to understand sort of beats of a story. You don't have to be great. Like being Steven Spielberg is a whole different thing.
Right.
But understanding basic story beats, basic rising and falling action, things like that is not so hard. Just like basic writing is not that hard. There's a million people out there, maybe not a million. There's a lot of people who are better writers than I am, in the sense of, like, if you took some sort of objective writing test about sentence structure and grammar or whatever, they do way better than both of us, right? But no one reads their stuff. Why? Because exactly, even if they're good storytellers, if they understand story intellectually, because they aren't willing to be vulnerable in the way that you have to. They either don't have anything to say or they aren't willing to say it. One or the other.
I think a lot of times people are afraid because they're afraid they'll miss job opportunities. They're afraid their friends will be upset or their family will be upset or they'll scare people away, because we all have these things that are embarrassing and we don't want to admit. And that's part of, I think, the appeal of particularly kind of the narrative nonfiction writing that you did in your books, is you're telling your story. You're not like making something up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little embarrassing, some of the things you're saying. It's why you engendered some hate from your books, which I'm sure was pretty frustrating. It's frustrating for me when I get some of the hate mails that I get.
Yeah.
But what would you say? How does somebody basically take the knife and cut themselves open and bleed? You did it in part because you were generating laughter out of it. So laughter was kind of your fuel.
Yeah, right. Laughter was my fuel. It's actually a really good question. How do you be vulnerable, right? That's a tough thing. It's funny. I probably spent I started writing about 27, and then my career probably peaked around 33, 34, 35. In terms of frat tire, like the stuff I was writing for myself, not what I do now. That peaked close to 8 years later. And then since then, I have spent a lot of time figuring out. I was very good at being vulnerable as a writer, very good. I was not so good at being vulnerable in my life with people that I cared about, people close to me. And I've spent a lot of time working on that, like a lot of time in therapy, a lot of time, whatever. And it's led to, we were talking about it on the way in, right? I have this boring life now. I'm like a father, 2 kids, young kids, a wife, and it's incredibly rewarding. I love it. I really do. It's boring in the best way. But like the only way I got there was by learning how to take the vulnerability I had in my writing and extend it to my life. I don't know.
What do you mean by extend it to your life? Does that mean like admitting to the people close to you when you're scared, or?
It's not that simple, man. It's just like I was, to be really truly honest, I was tactically vulnerable in my writing. I was vulnerable in the way that I knew I had to be for the writing to work and for it to be good, right? And my vulnerability and authenticity in that writing is real, but it is not. It's sort of like you're bouncing up on the surface, and then there's this lightning strike that's really deep, but then I come right back up to the surface, And so I think a lot of what people liked about my writing is that it was really funny and punchy, and I talked about things no one else had ever talked about. And then interspersed with that are these lightning strikes of insight that are really deep and vulnerable.
Right, which I think people didn't notice that they were appreciating.
A lot of people. Some people did. People like you did. Not everyone.
Like I remember the scene, and we even talked about it once before, the scene in the casino where you describe like 2 types of people. And there's just lots of really interesting observations about people in general and observations about yourself. But I think people were kind of looking for, it's like a kid looking for, the nude pictures in a magazine.
Right.
Like people were just kind of going to, oh, what's crazy
Some
thing
fans
does he do
definitely
next?
were, yeah.
And they weren't kind of seeing the actual sort of writing that was happening in between.
Some people, I think most of my fans, the ones who read it all, really were. I think most of them are more like you, like people who got it. There were definitely probably a third to a quarter who were definitely like, oh, fart jokes, sex jokes, this is great. And then most of the critics are people who didn't read it. It was just the vast majority, like literally more than 95%, are critiques of what they imagine me to be, of secondhand sort of. It's a critique of a secondhand characterization, not a critique of me. That actually was the thing that took me a long time to understand. It's like you live in this where you're seeing this now, really played out in media now. I was one of the first ones that really broke the Overton window in media.
What does it mean, Overton window?
Overton window is like the things you're allowed to talk about, right? Like Trump destroyed the Overton window in politics.
Where did Overton come from?
He was like the social psychologist who kind of named the phenomena that there are things you are allowed to talk about and things you are not allowed to talk about, right? And so I was one of the first people who broke the Overton window using the internet and then got actually famous where media had to pay attention to me. And so like, growing up, like, oh yeah, media this, media that, like all the stuff you hear that people say a lot now, I think I kind of understood, but you don't understand it until it happens to you. Oh my God, none of these people talking about me read any of my stuff, actually care about what I'm saying. They don't engage any of it. They are just using me as a prop so they can virtue signal to a different group of people. They're making me into something else that I'm not, some monster, so they can set themselves up as opposing the monster to some other group of people they want to look good to. That's all. And it took me maybe a decade to really understand what was going on. I'm like, it sounds funny, like naive to say, but I was like, I don't understand. Like, why would other writers not root for another writer? Like, how could you be? It doesn't make sense. And then it was like, it took me so long to understand that's what was going on. It's not just envy. It's for some people it was. A lot of them it was. But the other thing was, it's not envy. It's what you are and who you are is just a thing for them to riff on. To virtue signal. That's it. Like that's most of the critique of me. The vast majority of it is just that. In fact, I cannot really think of anyone who really took my writing seriously on an intellectual measure who was not a fan of some sort or liked it in some way.
But then so you've since gone on with those. You had those 4 books. Then you wrote how to increase your testosterone. Again, being open about a situation.
Well, it just came out. Everyone asked me about that. One of my books, like, if you guys can Google this, there's a video called Google Tucker Max Sex Ray, like SEXRAY. And like I hooked up with this nurse who ran some sort of medical clinic, and they had a fluoroscope, which is like a video X-ray machine. And she's like, oh, like, well, just Google it. You'll see. We basically invented a new type of porn. And then I went on Dr. Drew and showed it to him. And he's like, Dr. Drew was like, in 20 years, this is the most shocking thing I've ever seen. He's like, oh, you can't shock me. You can't, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, look at this. And he's like, what are you doing? And like, it created some medical issues for me. Obviously.
Are you sure it comes from that?
I mean, shooting radiation across your testicles is probably not a good way to increase your testosterone. If anything, it's going to do the opposite.
What about when you're in an airport screening? Like,
then we'd all have the problem.
Maybe we all do. Maybe we're all lower than we could have been.
So then that I wrote about that, and then I basically like some buddies, like this is like Tim Ferriss, some other people helped me get my testosterone back. And to where it normally was or close enough. And then I got so much email from people like, what did you do? And so I just wrote this book and it's like, here, like, I think I give it away now to people, but
I don't know. It's on Amazon.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you wrote Mate with Jeff Miller about kind of an evolutionary biology point of view on the pickup game.
Yeah, right.
Somewhat. And then you wrote the Book in a Box method, which we're going to talk about in a second, your company, Book in a Box. But what I'm also curious about is, you say the peak of that frat tire writing career was around 33. Were you sort of feeling, I've been writing this for 6, 7, 8 years, this style. Ultimately, there's only so much blood you have in the body that you
Yeah.
could bleed.
Yeah.
Like, were you feeling like, oh, what am I going to do to keep up this adulation of my artistic efforts? Like, were you having a internal battle on how you were going to reinvent yourself?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that was what was going on. To be really honest, I think the problem is I got caught in a cycle that I was talking about. Why do some people create great stuff and other people don't? I got caught. I started off doing the right thing, and then success taught me all the wrong lessons, and I fucked up a lot. And so in a way, I didn't even have to worry about reinventing myself because I kind of ended my own career early. And I kind of knew it. So at the end of Hilarity Ensues, which was like my 4th book in the series, I retired. So I went out, quote, on top, whatever. But because I went out with another #1 bestseller. But part of it was I had no more stories to tell. The other part was I had fucked up that career. I don't know what I made. Let's just call it $10 million off of that, including book sales and speaking and movie stuff and everything, right? I should have made 50 million or more, 100 million, 200 million. I should have made so much more. And not that money is everything, just money is a proxy for sort of
how
impact.
is that? How could you have made
Well,
more?
because here's a great. So I did beer. I fell into all the traps that sort of arrogant people fall into when they have a little bit of success. First of all, I thought all my success was because of me. Like I was a genius. I was untouchable. Everything I thought and did was gold, right? Which is nonsense. But most arrogant first-time successful people fall into this. And so what it did, and then I made the classic mistake. It's like I wrote Beer in Hell and it did well, and then it kind of fell off, and then it came back, like because it was such a popular book. It kind of by word of mouth, it spread and spread and spread. And instead of just doubling down on what was working, writing, I was like, okay. And then Beer in Hell came back on the bestseller list and stayed on for 5 years. I was like, all right, well, what can I like? I got famous for writing, but I really want to make movies. It's like, oh, God, I don't know how many times I've seen this, right? And I did it myself. People get famous for one thing, and how many athletes try and be rappers? How many actors try and be athletes or whatever, right? So I kind of took a long time in Hollywood. I didn't need to. I wasted a lot of time and effort on a lot of things that I probably shouldn't have.
Why didn't you then? I mean, I'm just curious. Like, given that negative experiences are often material, why didn't you write, like how Bukowski did, your own Hollywood type novel?
To be honest, I didn't think anyone cared that much. I didn't think maybe more importantly, I didn't care enough to write it. Like, it wasn't interesting to me.
But it was so frustrating. It was so painful.
Dude,
it was interesting at some extent to you.
Maybe. I think the real story of this is there. So Hollywood is a terrible, fucked up place. A lot of people have written a lot of stuff about this and done a lot of movies about this. That's not news.
Yeah.
The real story is I'll give you a great example. So the movie that was made in my first book, Niels Parker and I wrote, who you know well, we wrote the screenplay. We got offered $2.5 million for the screenplay from Fox Searchlight, and we turned them down to independently produce it. Because I was convinced I was going to break the Hollywood system. Like, the Hollywood economic system is basically formed as a response to George Lucas. Like, when he did Star Wars, he kept all the underlying IP, intellectual property rights. And because of that, in Hollywood, Star Wars became Star Wars, George Lucas became a multi-billionaire, and Hollywood's like, holy shit, that's what taught Hollywood that everything that they do is essentially underpinned by intellectual property, that they're not a movie. It's not a movie business, it's an IP business. And so after that, the only person who's ever been able to retain their control of IP is Tyler Perry, actually, who's done a little bit because he built his own studio in Atlanta and he raised all of his own money, right? And so I thought I was enough of a genius to be able to break the Hollywood system. And what's crazy is I almost did. I got a deal from the guys who did Donnie Darko, from independent producers. I got the George Lucas deal. No one can get the deal, and I got it. And so, of course, it just made me think I was that much more of a genius, right? And I was it was very much head up my own ass type thing. And what I opted for was to be right instead of doing the movie right. So it's like every decision I made about I didn't understand movies are collaborative arts. And so I made every decision about me and my ego, not about what was going to make the best movie. And so what I ended up with was a shitty movie.
So what was like an example bad decision?
The director.
Why was that choice about your ego?
I picked the director who buttered up the most and who made me feel like I was so much of a genius instead of the guy who would have done the in fact, the woman actually who probably would have done the best job on the movie. That's just one. The producers, I picked the wrong, and they're great guys. I just picked the wrong people. Like almost every decision I made was about the glorification of my ego and not about making the best movie, which is the opposite of what I did in the writing.
It's so funny because if you look at, you bring up George Lucas and Star Wars. If you look at who made a lot of the critical business decisions there, it was his wife, Marsha Lucas, actually kind of picked a lot of the,
people around him?
Yeah, people around him.
Probably explain, and they got divorced. It explains why the first three were way better than the second three.
Yeah, well, then they did get divorced, and she wasn't as involved, and he became more involved, and he has more of he's not so much plot-driven as toy-driven, and so that was it, and technology-driven.
Yeah.
So
yeah, those movies are all garbage. Like the later ones, I mean. Yeah, so I ended up, man, and basically the movie came out, it didn't do well. I was convinced this was going to be a huge hit. And we had the script for a huge hit. We did. It was an amazing script. All the biggest directors, actors in Hollywood. Justin Timberlake wanted to play me. We had, I really haven't written or talked about this stuff.
I just went down Justin Timberlake.
Do you want me to give you the real reason, man?
Yeah.
It's embarrassing.
We won't tell anyone.
Yeah, right. I'll tell you why. I wanted an unknown to play me because if a known actor played me, then he would get more of the credit for making. I was convinced that the Tucker Max character was going to be a huge thing, and I wanted it to be about me, not about the actor.
So you said no to Justin Timberlake.
And bigger actors than him, even.
And did you meet with Justin Timberlake about it, or?
Yeah, like his people, not him. But I forget his manager's name. This woman at the time, she was like, he loves the script, he wouldn't read for it or whatever. He's like one of those. But she's like, if you're in, he's in, and blah, blah, blah. And and we had major A-list directors. Dude, Fox Searchlight, which at the time was the studio in Hollywood, were they offered 2, went back 2.5. They said yes, turned them down. No one turned down Fox Searchlight. Like the stuff that it was just, it's one of those things, that scene in the movie, I love this movie, No Country for Old Men. When
I've read the book, haven't seen the movie.
Okay, same book in the movie, the same scene. At the very end, the guy Woody Harrelson is like the special forces guy, and then the guy who's like the killer, right?
Yeah.
They meet, and the guy who's the killer going to kill him, and he says, basically he says, what do you think of the rule now that it got you here? He's like, what are you talking about? He's like, you know what I'm talking about. And the point he's making is that all the decisions, the way you make decisions, led you to this point where I'm going to kill you now, And so he's asking him sort of like, what do you think about that? And that's what happened to me, is that I made decisions a certain way, and it led to a lot of success as a writer. And then I kind of changed my decision-making process, and it basically created the movie failing. It should have been a massive success. I made it fail. And once it failed, this ties back all the way into the first thing you asked, how do I keep getting better? At that point, I had a decision to make. Am I going to blame everyone else? I could have blamed the director. He did a terrible job, objectively, but I fucking picked the dude. I could blame any number of other people, but at the end of the day, it was my set of decisions that created all of that situation, right? Am I going to blame them, or am I going to blame myself? Or I'm going to take my own responsibility for the things that happened. And I did. And that kind of, I took that responsibility, and it was hard. That was the hardest hurt I've ever had to swallow, is that, I could have been way bigger at that phase of my life than I was, and I wasn't.
Again, though, how could you have been bigger? By writing more books in the
genre? I basically, I should have written, when the movie came out, Beer in Hell rocketed to the top of the charts, and I only had one book out that time. I could have had 2 or 3. And I didn't, because I had, Beer in Hell came out in 06, the movie came out in 09. I could have written at least 1, if not 2 more books in those ensuing 2 years, right? And good ones. So that's one. I could have, here's the thing. The marketing strategy surrounding the movie was about creating controversy. I mean, Ryan Holiday has made his whole career, not his whole career, but for a long period, his big claim to fame was that he helped me do that. And he did. We came up with that strategy, and it was the strategy is, let's create a bunch of, let's basically huge rage profiteering, like what Donald Trump is doing now very effectively. The difference is, I was trying to be famous with mainstream media. None of my fans cared about that. I had this massive bulk of fans that I could have written for and created stuff for, And it could have grown and grown. I didn't peak really as a writer until 2012. Like my sales peaked in 11 or 12. And so I had this huge runway to go. The problem is I created this tempest. Most people know me because my movie came out in 2009. And the way we got attention is we tried to shortcut the process. Like we basically created all this bullshit controversy. Like if you Google, there's a whole article, like a famous PR article written about this. I created the negative association with myself. Like Ryan and I did it, mainly me. No, that's not true. Ryan gets a lot of credit for this. He did a lot of the work. So we created this negative association between me and misogyny. And the way we did it is, he writes about this in Trust Me I'm Lying. We basically figure who are the most ridiculous, off the wall women's social justice groups we could find. And then we made up stuff about myself, right? We took stuff I said out of context, pumped it out to them. Then they got pissed off. We alerted the media to them getting pissed off. We essentially created, a tempest in a teapot. And then that blew up. And most of the people in America that have heard about me based around that. And they all like, oh yeah, that's that misogynist guy. That's that guy who hates women. That's the irony is it's my own fault. Like it is my own fault. And Ryan helped me orchestrate it. It's not his fault. I'm the one who I don't even know. He might even come up with it. It doesn't matter who came up with the ideas. The point is, I greenlit it. And I said, yes, this is great. Yes, let's do it. Let's go. Right? So it was my ego basically overtook my sense. I was like, oh yeah, like it doesn't matter how I get attention. I'm so amazing. People won't care, this or that. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up poisoning my well, right? And it's my own fault. There's no one else's fault but mine.
Okay, but is this so two things. A, this is related very much to recent decisions you made at your own company about yourself, about Book in a Box, but we're going to talk about that in a second. But I'm still sticking with the writing for a second because all of this is material that you could have written about in the same style.
I wasn't, let me be honest, I wasn't emotionally... I can only write about things that I've processed. You're very different than me. That's one of the things that makes you so special as a writer is that you can write about things as you're processing them. I can't do that. You're more vulnerable than I am in that regard. Like I'm just not, I'm too protective in that way. And so as I was going through these issues, I had to go through them first. I may come back and talk about this at some other point later on, like in a more written form. I don't know. It's not raw anymore. It's still really painful to me. And it's not like, look, I got very famous. I got all the things that come from that. It's just a matter of degree. But it really does suck to know that I was the governor of my own success. Like I was the limiter. I was the ceiling of my own success. And it was my decisions revolving around my ego and my arrogance and my emotional immaturity, man. It didn't have to be that way. Like it just didn't. It didn't.
Let's stop to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Oh my gosh, I love these clothes. Mizzen and Main. That's Mizzen and Main. It really is the most comfortable work clothes. Travel clothes. I had to travel this whole week. I'm traveling for a week and a half, and I just took Mizzen and Main clothes with me. Close out 2023 in style with comfortable, breathable, packable, and machine washable pieces from Mizzen and Main. As you wrap up your year-end goals, enjoy a Mizzen and Main dress shirt that you can wear confidently. I like that they've very, very just nice, solid colors. I don't really like to get all fancy in patterns and everything, although they do have some pattern shirts, but very comfortable clothes, stretchable pants. It's just super comfortable, but they look professional, and you can wear them casually or professionally. I like some of their flannel shirts or untuck shirts. I love untuck. I never tuck in. So again, whether you're shopping for a special someone or giving yourself the gift you really want, I just buy myself gifts. Mizzen and Main is the perfect gift for any guy who works, travels, and cares about looking and feeling great. As you could tell by my many photos across the internet, I care about looking fantastic. I'm practically a model. And let's be honest, every guy loves to look great. So Again, shop now at mizzenandmain.com and save 20% when you spend $130 or more using promo code James. That's promo code James at Mizzen and Main, Mizzen and Main.com. You know what I love about fantasy sports is that even though I'm not going to be a great basketball player or a baseball player or a football player or whatever, I feel like I get to participate and make decisions and use my knowledge of these different leagues or these different sports to compete. So it's like I can pick my team or I can pick my favorite players and I could use my knowledge to make predictions and maybe even make money. So with the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League on Prize Picks. This is a league created specifically for combo projections that include two or more players from different sports or leagues. Want to play alongside some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and comedian Andrew Schultz, who's also been a guest on this podcast, and I've been a guest on his? You can now find community plays under the promos tab of the app to view entries for some of the biggest names in the Prize Picks community each week. Look, Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player is rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy. What? So I love playing it. I love anywhere where I can use analytical ability with my interests to demonstrate some skill and maybe make some money. And I like the game-like aspect. I do wish they had chess as a category on prizepicks.com, but I'll settle for what they've got. Maybe I should make my own fantasy chess league. But in any case, I love Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/James. Use code James for a first deposit match up to $100. That's the easiest $100 you're ever going to make. So that's prizepicks.com/James and use code James. Daily fantasy sports made easy. The future of learning is definitely online. Like, it's such BS that you have to spend $200,000 or take $200,000 in loans and go to some fancy school when it's useless. It doesn't guarantee you a job. Most employers, including me, do not care about degrees or grades or anything like that. We want to care that you love what you're doing, that you know what you're doing, in some cases that you have experience or that you're willing to learn. But people in general love learning and are curious. Like, the key to success is curiosity. And I think masterclass.com is the perfect model for online learning. I'm really happy they're sponsoring this episode. If you're going to give a gift, give the gift of learning. Masterclass makes a meaningful gift this season for you and anyone on your list, because both of you can learn from the best to become your best, from leadership to effective communication to cooking. Let me tell you some of the classes I've taken. I've taken comedy from Steve Martin. I mean, can you believe I can take a class from Steve Martin on comedy, or Judd Apatow, my favorite comedy director? I could take an actual class from him on writing. Wolfgang Puck on cooking. Dan Brown on writing, or Judy Bloom, who's been on this podcast, on writing. By the way, Wolfgang Puck also has been on this podcast. It's such a pleasure. I try to take classes all the time from masterclass.com. And whether you're watching Masterclass on TV or listening in audio mode in the app or on their site, the quality speaks for itself. It's like these Masterclass instructors are your own personal mentors that are going to help you reach the next level. How much would it cost to take one-on-one classes on comedy from Steve Martin or on chess from Gary Kasparov? You just wouldn't be able to do it. But it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. With a Masterclass annual membership, it's $10 a month. Memberships start at $120 a year for unlimited access to one-on-one classes with all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. So it's not just $120 for one instructor. You get all 180 plus Masterclass instructors. Boost your confidence and find practical takeaways you can apply to your life and at work. And if you own a business or are a team leader, use Masterclass to empower and create future-ready employees and leaders. That's the real education in today's world. So This holiday season, you can give one annual membership and get one free at masterclass.com/JAS. JAS, of course, stands for the James Altucher Show. So right now you can get 2 memberships for the price of one at masterclass.com/JAS. Masterclass.com/JAS. Offer terms apply.
So we've done a podcast before about your company, Book in a Box, but I just want to describe it real quickly. It's basically a lot of busy people out there want to write books. They don't have the time to write or the ability to write. They go to you, your company interviews them, and 6 months later they have a book. This is kind of a Book in a Box in a nutshell.
Right. We have an algorithmic process, so it's not like it's their ideas in their words and their voice. Like you've had a bunch of our authors on. John Rulin, I know, did a book with us. You've had a bunch more.
Yeah. So you've kind of morphed your kind of passion for writing into helping others create books, and they're good books. They're not like
they're not garbage books. No.
Yeah, and they feel like okay. So this is I'm gonna get to the story in kind of a backwards way, but I read J.T. McCormick's book. Okay, I got there. I forget the subtitle about he survived abuse, all these things, and now he's actually the CEO of Book in the Box, which we'll talk about in a second. But I read that book, and it's written from his point of view. Yeah. Obviously, you guys wrote it, but it's his story. Yeah. It feels like he wrote it, and it's a well-written book.
He did. That's the thing. Is like we basically figured out a way. I like to say we disrupted ghostwriting, right? So ghostwriting is like you pay someone a bunch of money, and then they talk to you for a while, and they go write their version of a book. And that's all. It's never made sense to me because like then at that point you're not really the author. And so what we developed was kind of by accident. We developed a process where we essentially interview you and create an outline. Right, and then we interview you off of the outline, and so it's record that, transcribe it, and then edit that transcript into prose. So that way, it's not our idea of what you're saying.
Still their words.
It's all their ideas. It's their words, and we even do it in their voice. So if we do it right, and we do it right almost all the time, not every single time, but almost all the time, someone should read the book and have no idea that anyone else was even involved.
But you're definitely doing something where there are writerly things happening in the book that they probably didn't say it in that order. Like you're creating
that's our job.
Climaxes and cliffhangers.
That's our job.
And arcs.
That is our job because their job is to have the ideas in their head. Our job is to put those ideas in a book the way they should be in a book. So we see ourselves almost as like when a NASCAR driver wins a race. No one really credits the pit crew, even though they're important. No one thinks about them. They think about the driver, right? That's the way we think about it. Is like we're kind of like the pit crew. Yeah, you need us, but we don't get to stand on the podium. We're not the famous ones. The author is. That's why we don't take any sort of authorial credit. Like we don't feel like we deserve to. Whereas a ghostwriter, a lot of times can be like, yeah, like I wrote that book. That's like Trump's ghostwriter came out and was like, he didn't write any of this. That's all me, right? We couldn't do that because the way we work, it's not, I don't know anything about giftology. No one in my company does. That's all Rulin stuff, like we captured his voice. They read the book. People read the book. They're like, oh yeah, this is exactly the way John talks.
No, sure. And I will say, having read Giftology and then of course J.T. McCormick's book, they're totally different styles.
Of
everything.
Course. They should be. Those two men are totally different.
Yeah. Well, so which brings us now finally to the interesting story here. You say you don't process things in real time, but you've been writing the story bit by bit. You have this sequence
6 months behind, though.
All right, 6 months behind, but like you have a sequence of articles on your website, Asshole to CEO.
Right.
And the final article is you basically fired yourself as CEO, and because you admit you were a bad CEO and you hired J.T. McCormick.
Yeah.
And so there's one thing I want to ask, and then I want to kind of get into the full story of it. So you say so J.T. McCormick was, of course, a client first.
Yeah.
He was doing a book through you. He was a CEO or president of another company.
Yep.
And he sat in on a management meeting or a management discussion at your company, and you were getting angry at the general manager.
Yeah.
And he diffused it in some incredible way, but you didn't say how he diffused it. I was just really curious how he did it. And this is what impressed you.
Yeah.
One of the main things that impressed you.
Because he could deal with me. Like when I get angry, I I'm a hard person to deal with, man. I'm very intense and I'm very overpowering, and most people just can't deal with it. And I don't mean it like in a bragging way. It's, if anything, it's a weakness of mine, that I can just run people over. And I couldn't run him over. And he kind of flipped it. And I was like, fuck, man, this dude, like, basically what he did was he made me see what I was doing, but not in a confrontational way.
So specifically, what did he do?
So very specifically, he kind of like, first off, he totally misdirected the conversation, right? So he like literally got me thinking and talking about something totally unrelated.
Well, okay. What were you upset about? What were you upset about?
So I don't honestly remember what I was upset about. What I was actually, in the moment, I don't know what I was yelling at her about. What I was upset about was the fact that she was a total failure at her job and that I had picked her. Like, I was the one who hired her for the company to save the company, and she was literally the exact worst person we could have hired, and it was all my fault. And I had not yet swallowed that, you know? And so I was really angry. I was angry at her for being a failure, but I'm angry at myself ultimately for picking the wrong person, you know? That's why I was so angry. Like, we were talking about something minuscule. I can't remember what it was. Whatever, like the way she put a spreadsheet together. Who knows? Something so small, it did not make sense that I would be that angry.
So right? JT is sitting there kind of looking at this from the outside, and what does he say to you?
So he first off, he misdirects me. So the anger immediately diffuses because he's not coming at me oppositionally.
What did he say to misdirect you?
I honestly don't remember. It was such a misdirection. I can't remember what it was now, but it was sort of like if I was yelling at her about a spreadsheet, he's like, Tucker, who's your favorite football team? I'm like, whatever. I don't know. The Redskins, or and I don't even know why. He's like, okay, let me ask you a question about the Redskins, and blah, blah. And so like just a real quick, like one or two things. But what it did is it got me off of my sort of like spin cycle of anger, right? Then he brought it right back before I got like frustrated, like, what the fuck are we talking about this for? Then he's like, all right, let me ask you another question. It was kind of related, but not really.
So it's almost like he misdirected, and then he's metaphorically bringing it back.
Brought it back. And what he basically did was, you know, why are you doing this company? And I'm like, you know why? He's like, tell me exactly. Why does this matter to you? He's like, you got money. You don't have to do this. Why are you doing it? So I kind of gave him the spiel. He's like, all right, so let me ask you, when you yell, what do you think that does? Does that help your goal or hurt it? And then I started to like try and argue the point that I was yelling about. And he said, no, hold on. We'll get to that in a minute. We're going to get to the point. Do you think yelling helps your mission or hurts your mission? It doesn't. It probably doesn't help. He's like, let me paint a picture for you. And so like, whatever, like he kind of told this story about how like the company was painted a picture of the company a few years in advance and like doing really well. And then like something happening and me blowing up. And then like basically creating basically causing like really important people to leave and quit, right? It's like, would you want that? No. He's like, no. He's like, can a CEO have that? No, you can't. He basically he asked a series of questions and made me understand that what I was doing was destroying what I was trying to accomplish. But he did it in a way that was not confrontational. He made me see it to myself. Right? In the moment. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so you were the CEO then. Then he calls you up and basically says he wants to leave being president of a huge software company, I guess.
$100 million software company, a huge one. Yeah.
Yeah. And why did he then want to, he didn't even say, I want to be CEO of your company. No, he was willing to work under you.
He's going to come in as president. You know what's funny is Zach and I at first didn't believe him. We were like, okay, this has to be a scam. Like at first, we'd been to his office at Headspring, like when he like signed the contract to be a client and stuff. So it's like, I knew like he worked there. We'd been there. But what's funny is we went on a Friday, and Fridays is like the sort of work from home day at his company at the time. So there weren't a lot of people in the office. So Zach and I were like trying to think of ways that he was like a scammer. We're like, what if he's the janitor and he saved up all his money and he brought us in on the off day? Like that's how crazy. The only scam we could come up with was he was like going to work really hard for 10 years and help us scale this company. Like we could not figure out how he was scamming us. That's how crazy this seemed to us. At the time, I think we had not even done $2 million in revenue as a company.
And he's running a $100 million revenue company.
Right. $100 million valuation. I think they were doing close to 20, 25, 30, whatever. They like maybe just had an offer to buy them at like 100 million. So yeah, he's doing crazy, like 10, 100 times that. And so like we've eventually realized he's super sincere, and like there are a couple reasons that actually made sense. Like he didn't really have any equity in that company. Like there were some other things going on, and he didn't care about software, and he loved like kind of what we're doing and all those other sorts of things. And so so we brought him on, man, and that was almost a year ago to the day. Like I think his 1 year anniversary was like March 1st or something. It's fun. Yeah, now think about it. We just crossed 450 books.
Wow.
And
okay, I didn't know that.
I forget if we crossed 8 or 9 million in revenue. And like we were at maybe 2 when he came on board. So in a year, this dude is like, and the crazy thing is he spent most of the last year unfucking a bunch of our messes. Like he wasn't even in growth. He couldn't be in growth mode because we had such an amazing idea as a company, a lot of good people, but we had everything dicked up. We had so much dicked up.
It kind of lets you do what you're, in my opinion, what you're good at. Because I've seen you present several times now about the company, and you're like really good at it. You're like you widen my own definition of what self-publishing could be about. I even wrote about it this morning.
Yeah, I saw that actually.
Yeah, because you said now someone could even write a book about their own family history. They don't have to write a bestseller. They could write something that just lasts. It's just an event.
Yeah,
and you're a great spokesperson for the company, and he gets to then build it.
He gets to run it. Yeah. Like this is right. Like I had another one of these moments, man. It's like, this is why I spent 4 years in psychoanalysis, why I spent so much time working on myself physically, emotionally, mentally, is for this moment. Is like a year and a half into the company, we had this amazing idea, we had all these clients, we were growing incredibly fast, and everything was coming apart at the seams because, frankly, Zach and I did not know how to scale a company. We just didn't know how.
Like, was logistics falling apart or sales falling apart?
No, it's like... Well, we didn't understand a few core things. Like we didn't understand that at our essence, we're not actually a book publishing company, we're a relationship company. Because so many people have this deep emotional relationship to books and to their book, and it's very much tied into their identity. And the way we were looking at it was sort of professionals, like artisans, like craftsmen. We knew we did a great job. Like stop worrying about it. Just get on the phone. We tell you to get on the phone. Tell us, answer our questions, and we're going to get you an amazing book. And we did. The problem was we weren't dealing with people's emotional experience.
Like, what's an example where you messed up in that way?
Oh my God, there's so many. We have a whole batch of authors who got amazing books and who like they're like, yeah, my book's good, but they're like, I don't know, dealing with them was really hard. Or like, I don't know. Like we just had a lot of sort of that middle stage, like author like 25 to 50 in terms of like, we're at 450 now. That in there, like the early ones, we were still small enough. We're kind of just doing things on a one-off basis. And they had relationships with me or Zach. So it was kind of a different thing. Once we got to the point where we had people, we hired all the wrong people. That's another huge, like the number one rule in startups is hire great people. We thought we were. JT came on board, fired 9 of the first 11 people that we hired, not counting Zach and I. Like we only have 2 people that are still here. They got here when he got here. And they weren't bad people. They were just the wrong people for the company. And so we had the wrong people doing the wrong thing. And it just wasn't, we just weren't doing, we weren't, it's like the difference between children and adults, man. Like a grown-up adult company. Because what we're doing is very complicated, man. This is a manufacturing process for books, but that still has to hit a very high artistic quality level and has to manage someone's emotional process through one of the most sort of deeply touching things they're ever going to do. Even if it's a book just about business, this is a representation of themselves.
Well, it's their story. Like you look at JT's book, it's a very painful story.
Well, JT's is a memoir, but yes, exactly. Yeah. Like, I mean... So we had a very complicated business, and we were not doing a good job. Like our financials weren't in order. Like we were making money, man. That's so crazy. We were making money, and it's not like like we had receipts in shoeboxes or something, but like we didn't know exactly how much each book cost because the way we were paying freelancers and stuff, it was hard to reconcile accounts. So kind of grown up things like that, you can't scale a company like that.
Right.
Or like, the way that we were onboarding and hiring freelancers, the good ones were doing a great job and the bad ones were creating horrible customer experiences for our authors. Like our authors like hated them or whatever. And we didn't, there were just a lot of things we weren't doing right. Now we do them all right, but we just didn't have it together, man. It was like, and so I basically had to ask myself the question, do I want to have a great company or do I want to be in charge? Is it about me or is it about our mission? And it was really, that's why I was yelling at that GM, because it was right in that phase. Because that was the thing. Zach and I knew this. So we went looking for a professional manager first. And that's who we hired, is this woman from a huge software company, the most impeccable resume ever, seemed like a total baller. And she got in the company, and James, I knew almost the first day. In fact, you know how I knew? Oh man, I wish I paid attention to my gut. You know how I knew? It was one question. We're a startup. We're a year and a half old. We've done $2 million in revenue. We've got like 5-6 full-time people, right? Her first question. Oh, so what kind of computer am I going to get? Are you guys buying me? And like that if at LinkedIn or something, that question makes perfect sense, right? At a startup, this is what she's thinking about and asking. And I remember it. I had this feeling in me. It was like, get out. Like in the movie, you're watching like a scary movie and you're like, get the hell out of the house. Like that was the feeling I had, and I ignored it. And then
what could you have done though? Like now,
I should have just fired her immediately.
Right there.
I should have immediately been like, this is wrong. This is not like the right fit. There were other things. It's not like that was by itself. There were multiple other things like that. That was just the thing where I knew, where I had that, oh my God.
Did JT get rid of her?
No, I cleaned up the mess I made. I fired her.
Okay.
She did. Technically, she quit, but we kind of gave her. It was like one of those things. It was like, look, she saw the writing on the wall. She is really smart. She's amazing. I can see why she did super well at a huge company. She is the best I've ever seen at managing internal politics and like not doing work, but managing work. Right? She doesn't actually know how to build anything. She didn't actually know how to do anything in a business except politically manage relationships.
So JT comes in and
he's the opposite of that.
Kind of
he's
clean
the
shop.
Iconic doer. That dude knows everything. He knows how to you want to talk about financials. This dude, our financials now are so amazing. He can tell you anything you need to know about our company just on our P&L and financials, right? And then he understands customer service. He grew up in sales. So the dude's a world-class salesman. He is one of those guys. He's not a startup guy. He's a pure, solid business guy who's had all these different jobs in his life, sold all these different things, built these different companies, didn't start them, built them, scaled them. And everything.
And why again did he want to go from his $100 million company to
he didn't
your
own
little
it straight up?
company?
He didn't own any of that company.
Okay.
He joined that company when they were 10 years old and they had done $2 million a year in revenue for 10 straight years or something like that. I'm making up numbers, but basically, and he basically joined. He had made a bunch of money in mortgages. He ran Wachovia mortgage division in Texas, all this kind of stuff. And then mortgage crisis happened and he had tons of money at that point. He just sat at home, eating Jack in the Box, working out, reading. And some recruiter found him and he's they basically, long story short, he's he didn't know anything about software. He thought, okay, this might be fun. Let me go join a little techie type software startup and see what I can do, right? And so what he ends up doing is, he's the only sales guy. He ends up bringing in so much sales, they have to tell him to stop selling because they don't have the people to do it. So they go from 2 to 5 to 10 to 20. He's doubling them every year almost. And basically then he's heading the sales team and then he's the VP. And then the guy running it is can you just run the whole company for me? And so it took about 5 years. He went from the one sales guy to, in 2 years, he was the president. And the next 3 years, they went from 20 people to 100 people and 5 offices around the country. And he figured out, he learned all these things about really scaling a tech company and all these sort of things. And so at that point, that's when he met us. And he didn't own any piece of that business. And it's not, listen, it was the commodity part of software business, right? Enterprise sales type things and all that kind of stuff. And so, I met him and it was you know how I am, man. If I want to sell somebody, I can. I didn't even try and sell him. It was just more he was so interested in what we were doing and he thought it was so amazing. And he saw us screwing up. And the ways we were screwing up, he's I know I can fix those. He's I know why you two are screwing up. I know I can fix those. And I know this can be $1 billion company. You two aren't going to do it. And no offense, you're not going to get this done, at least not in time. And so, at first, of course, I was bafangul, fuck you, right? But he was right. He was right. And And so it was one of those, it was weird, a really hard decision, but it was like, I knew it was the right decision because as soon as I made it, I felt like 1,000 pounds lighter. I was like, I'm going to bring in this guy who has the exact skill set we need, and I'm going to put him in charge, and I am going to step out of being in charge, and I'm now going to report to him. Now, I still own the majority of the company, and between Zach and I, we still control the entire company, but he's going to be the real CEO, and I'm really going to step down, and I am going to listen to him in the areas that I'm not good at, and I'm going to focus on the things I am really good at, and he'll learn from me in those regards too. But it boiled down to, I decided I was going to make it about the mission and not about me, and I made the right decision. Now look, I mean, we're 3 times bigger in a year. We're going to do 10 or 20 million this year in revenue.
And how's he like? What's he doing different on the sales side to get, all these authors? And like going from 20 authors to 450, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And that's, by the way, I can't even imagine, that's a huge logistical problem.
Which he solved.
Yeah.
Like, he's amazing. It's not, so I'm a pretty good sales guy. He's much better. Like, being a one-off thing and being able to build something scalable are two different things. So he understands how to hire salespeople, how to train salespeople, how to build a department. I know none of that. None, zero, like nothing. And so like, I'm not even that good at sales, to be honest. I'm just good. I believe in what we're doing and I can talk about it eloquently, which is a little bit different than sales. So like we just hired our first actually sales guy because long story short, we hired our first real sales guy like 3 months ago. And the dude's already doing great, because JT hired him, JT trained him. He was already really good at sales. JT picked him out and the guy's like amazing. Dude, we have 20 full-time people now, and only 2 of them are holdovers from before him. And the other 18 are all like amazing.
So 20 full-time, how many freelancers?
About 150-ish.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's a big company.
We're building a manufacturing process for books, dude.
Do you think this kind of ability to kind of focus on the end game as opposed to the ego, do you think this is related to you also starting a family? Because I noticed for myself, when I first started having kids, it kind of changed my attitude completely about making money. Like I realized, oh my God, it's not just making money for me. Like I'm gonna have to make this kid has to live for 18 years. I've got to feed her.
Yeah, I don't know how much that had to do with it, to be honest. I don't know. I'm not sure. My kids have changed me a lot in the medium term. They're both very sensitive, and I'm not. And so like I've had to learn to be very aware of my behavior because like my son Bishop's 2.5 and my daughter Vaughn is like 3 months. And not sensitive in a bad way. I think it's probably a normal way. I'm just like not like that. And so like I know my son is going to pay attention. He's going to learn from me by watching what I do, not by listening to what I say. And so I both know what I do in front of him, what I do as a man at all, and especially in front of him, is going to be how he learns to be a man. And so like how I talk to his mother is going to greatly impact him, and how I talk to his sister and his grandmother, and how I talk to him. Like there are times like, he'll do some kid thing. I'm like, Bishop, what are you doing? And he'll like kind of freeze and get that like deer in the headlights look. And I'll realize, I didn't even realize I was like, had a sharp intonation, right? And then I'll think, oh God. And then I've got to like calm down, and not even that I thought I was that, whatever. And I got to back up, like, come over here, buddy. Cause I realized like, like parents have a nuclear power over their kids, like especially same-sex parents, right? And if his experience of me is like snapping at him all the time and being angry all the time, or even a little bit, like that's going to greatly impact him.
Are you saying this from experience? Like was your dad angry at you all the time?
My dad wasn't around. Like my dad wasn't around. My grandmother was a yeller, definitely. She was an angry, bitter yeller. Not just at me, at everybody. She was a drunk and like really, frankly, a mean person. And she was one of those women who grew up like when sexism was like awful, like crazy, like I can't believe someone would do that type. And I think she was very independent, and she just had a hard time dealing with a lot of that stuff. And instead of like dealing with it, she took it out on the people around her. And then my mom was just a mess. And so like I didn't grow up in a good situation, and my dad was gone. And when So like I didn't grow up in a very good situation at all, and
Is that
so
kind of hard? Trying to understand then what a good situation even is.
yeah, of course. That's my wife definitely had better parents than me, and she's way more sort of centered and calm, which is one of the reasons I was so attracted to her. Is she's like rock solid.
That's very
So
clear. I've
stable.
met her many times. She's rock solid.
She is so rock solid. But yeah, a big part of therapy was understanding not just what does normal look like, because there's no such thing as normal. Everyone gets obsessed with what's normal. No, what's healthy look like, you know? And healthy is, for me, all I care about is that Bishop and my kids know that I love them, that both me and my mom love them very much, and that we're going to love them and support them no matter what they do. But the world is not going to like treat them the way we are, you know, like they're always going to be able to come to us and get that sort of love and unconditional love and affection. But I also need to help them understand that there are rules and boundaries and consequences in the world, and both in our relationship, but then in the broader world. I've got to help him as much as possible prepare for his life, while knowing he's got a soft place to land with us no matter what.
So going back to the business, you had this great idea. Nobody else was doing it at the time. I don't know if there's competitors now. I have no idea, actually. Are there competitors to Book on the
Yeah,
Box?
I mean, not really. They don't, it's sort of like, no, it's like, are there competitors of Ferrari? Kind of, but not really. No.
So you have this great idea. You created a bunch of books initially. You were a great spokesperson for it. You bring on this CEO. Now what do you do on a daily basis there?
Man, I do a lot. You know, honestly, I do a lot of things I should have been doing from the beginning. It's funny. I feel like it's hard to say, I guess. I feel like I was really kind of a garbage entrepreneur. Like I was really bad. Like it's funny to say, having this really successful company that's growing crazy and getting all this press and doing amazing. I feel like I was a really bad entrepreneur. I'll give you a great example. So right now, my kind of area of responsibility, my title is director of product. Because what I do, I spend all of my time pretty much working on how, like we're rolling out all these new divisions slowly, but like we're developing them, right? Like great example is speech in a box, right? So you want to do a speech, come to us, and it's basically the same book in a box process, which is structured around speeches. So we'll interview you, we'll understand who's your audience, what are you trying to accomplish, all these sort of things.
I love this idea.
It's good, and we have
You
like
make
this,
the speech?
Exactly. We help them. We kind of get everything out of their head. We craft a speech. We have them give it to us. We do a bunch of refinements. You know, like we'll. I have this amazing database of like great anecdotes people can tell. You know, like we have all these different structures, speeches, and so it's not like. Please, probably shouldn't have talked about this because God forbid people are going to want this as a service now. It'll be out soon, but my job is like developing the new things we do. Right. So I kind of develop the idea. I beta test it internally. Then I beta test it with a few clients, and then we roll it out and we kind of go slow and things like that. So we already have, what do we have out? We have publishing in a box, which is like book in a box, except you just bring us a manuscript and we do all the publishing. We have Thought Leader Media, which is sort of like Thought Leader in a box. Like we do articles, we do PR for them, that kind of stuff. And then we have Podcast in a Box is about to launch. We've got, so basically like what you're doing, we just do all the work for people, you know? So that's my job, is to do those things. And the way JT makes me do them now is so methodical. And it's great because like now we're building a company to scale. Like before, Zach and I were like, let's get it done. Let's do amazing things. Let's do this cool stuff. But like we were always chasing the cool, shiny thing, solving the hard problem, instead of saying like, okay, how are we going to, do this project management? How are we going to, who's responsible for this little thing? Who's doing this little thing? Like he makes me be very deliberate in how I do things, which ends up creating better processes and better products. And we're building a great company. But like all those things I could have done from the beginning with Book in a Box, I was too arrogant in a way, I think, and either I didn't know or I just thought, oh yeah, like anyone can do that. How hard can that be?
So to some extent, you got mentoring from JT in terms of like what does a bigger business look like, and
what does a grown-up business look like,
and given where you envision it, your dream 5 years from now, backing up, what does that say about your behavior now? Will your behavior now lead to that vision you have 5 years from now?
Yep.
But I think also I really like the fact that this Book on the Box kind of comes out of your initial passion for writing.
Yeah.
And so let's say someone's listening to this and they're trying to figure out, there's two things they could be listening and thinking about is A, everybody's got a book inside of them. What could they write about with you? They don't even need to write it. They could just call you guys and talk. But what if they're thinking, well, how do I find what my particular passion is that I could make a business about? This is sort of like 15 years coming for you.
Yeah, so that is something I know well. So I feel like anyone who is looking for their passion is you're doing it wrong. So think about I always think it's easier to break things down to their core elements, right? Why the hell does business exist at all? Any business. It's to meet the needs of someone, right? Like someone has a book in them that they want to write that will help them in some way they think is more valuable than $25,000. So they come to us so we can kind of do that for them, right? Or, if you're hungry, you want to eat, you go to a restaurant, you give them money, they give you food, you're both better off, right? They're meeting your needs. So people think business is about passion. It's not about passion. That's really stupid. I hate that. There's nothing wrong with passion. Passion is amazing. But you need to first start with what the hell do people want? Not what do they want to buy? What needs need to be met first, right? Then that's where you got to understand that as a core thing, all right? Then the next sort of step is understanding, okay, what skills do I have? What can I do that other people find valuable, whether directly or indirectly, right? And then, what are people going to pay for, right?
I think a lot of people don't know what their skills are or don't know what their unique skills are.
Well, if you start with what do people want, right? What can I do? Then you can look at, all right, well, what other skills do I need to develop, right? If I want to start a business. So now you can start in areas you think are interesting, right? Or passionate, like you're passionate about whatever, some area. That's fine. It's not like you can't care about passion. Start there. Like if you're passionate about dogs, okay? I think there's probably a million businesses in dogs. Actually, let me give you a better example. I thought about with Veronica yesterday. This is an amazing business, and if I had nothing else to do, I'd build this. So we were in the supermarket the other day, and there's the organic sort of healthy, clean food movement is a massive secular wave that is coming and will overtake the sort of corporate industrialized food that we've been eating for post-World War II era. All the big PPC product companies know this. That's why they're buying all these companies, all the little organic ones. The one area where there's almost no sort of really good products are ethnic foods, like organic, paleo, clean, whatever, however you want to frame it. There's almost nothing in real ethnic stuff. Korean, Chinese, Mexican specifically. There's a few little companies that are trying it. No one's really there, right? So if you got a massive passion for food, look around. There's a massive hole in that market right now. I could easily go in and start the Mexican paleo organic food company right now today. I can think of two companies that are trying to be competitors, and I could smoke them in the market, no problem.
Well,
Same thing for Korean and Chinese.
So let's say I wanted to do this. I'm not a chef. I don't know how food ingredients mix with each other. So I'd have to find a chef.
No, why? I wouldn't find a chef.
Okay, so what
because
would you
a
do?
chef is going to bring a lot of baggage. I would say if you want to, let's say you want to go to Korean, right? Okay, great. First off, if you don't love Korean food, I would not recommend it. But if you love Korean food, that's your thing, then I would say go start cooking all the Korean food you can, right? So let's say you eat healthy, paleo, organic, whatever you want, and you okay, there's right now there's really nothing in Korean. I can think of no one who has any national footprint at all. There's one local in Austin. Their stuff's okay. So go start making Korean food. Learn how to make Korean food. Get decent at it. You don't have to be great. Develop fundamental expertise in gochujang and all the different Korean ingredients and start making it and see, okay, what are the fundamental ingredients in Korean food? Kimchi, things like that. Where do I buy them? And where do I get healthy versions? They don't exist. Okay, what goes in these? How can I make these? How can I make healthy kimchi? How can I make healthy gochujang? How can I make healthy whatever, right? Make it for yourself. Now, try and sell it. Does anyone like it? Does anyone who wants Korean food, constituent Korean sort of ingredients, are they willing to pay? Because it's going to cost more money to do that sort of healthy stuff. Are they willing to buy it? Go find, where are those people? I mean, there's a million farmers markets, right? Go try and sell it. Go see if there is a market for this, right? then because you don't even know if you have a business. Like I'm assuming this is going to be big.
This is a really good point, actually. People don't know they have a business. They have an idea. They don't know how they have a business.
A bunch of people have an idea, and their ideas are almost always stupid because they're like, "Oh, here's an idea I have," and then I'll ask them basic questions like, "Who wants that? Who's going to pay for that?" And I don't know. I think it's just clever. That's not how you start a business. You start a business by meeting someone's needs. So my assumption here is that there are a lot of people who want to cook with Korean food, who want healthy versions of because the stuff you got to buy at Korean markets is like awful, the worst. Chinese is even worse, man. I know this because I was, long story short, I was trying to learn Szechuan cooking, me and my wife were, and like trying to find good Korean, Chinese ingredients is impossible. Like we had to order Szechuan peppercorns from like China. It was the worst. But like, anyway, so like, how big is that market? It might be tiny. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. So you need to like try and sell it. See if anyone wants to buy it, right? And if they do, okay, maybe you have to help create that market. Maybe people think they can't cook Korean at home because it's too complicated. So maybe what you have to do is like be the person who teaches Americans how to cook Korean at home. It's actually not hard at all. And Korean food is amazing and super healthy, and you can eat super paleo. So maybe you become the person who teaches the paleo community how to eat Korean, and then you sell them all the products with it. You make all the sort of the hard things. You don't sell them the lettuce and the meat. They can get that anywhere. But the sort of constituent ingredients that aren't found in normal supermarkets, right? That's how you develop a business is you look, where is there a need? What skills am I missing to get there? Develop those skills and then solve those problems along the way. I'll tell you right now, you cannot name a business right now, a mature business that could not be disrupted easily by someone who really understood it, who came in with a fresh mind. I have a hard time thinking of one that couldn't be disrupted. Like the ones that could are like, oh, come on. Like go down the list, man.
Well, think about how, I'm just thinking about how you started Book in the Box. It was, you were trying to talk the CEO, a specialist in pop-up stores. You were trying to talk her into writing a book. And she's like, listen, I'm too busy. You're trying to convince me. You figure it out how I could do it, and that's so she
without
had a
ghostwriting. That's what she said. It's got to be her ideas. Yeah.
And what's interesting, this is I think a common evolution of businesses is what's happening with your business right now. Is it starts off as an agency. You're essentially providing the specialists are providing a service to the first clients.
Yes.
But then you productize the service, and that's how you scale.
And then you scale. Exactly right. That's actually a better way to frame it than I did.
Well, and I've seen a lot of software companies start that way. Oracle was a service, and they provided the same service so many times, and it was basically creating databases for companies. They became a database company, and that's how your value goes up, is when you create a product that's scalable. A service is not scalable. So that's a very so what you're describing there is you almost can provide someone can test an idea by seeing if they can sell the service to a few people, and then you start to scale it, figure out how to scale it.
Yeah, or just sell it on a small scale, one or the other. Yeah, absolutely, of course.
So I'm interested also in just kind of what's going to happen to books. So, books, there's so many books being published now, and in part because of all this, not only self-publishing, but then companies like yours are going to make it very easy to publish books.
We've just started, man. It's going to get way bigger.
I know. So is it going to drown out? I already feel like since 2010, I feel like between 2000 and 2010, there was this room for people to really break out as, like you did, and Tim Ferriss did, and Malcolm Gladwell did, break out with like these huge nonfiction bestseller books. There's so many books out there, and there's so many blogs, and you don't really know what to do. There's just too much.
Yeah,
all voices are being drowned out.
I actually disagree. I think there's not enough. I think we're actually in a transitionary phase. So think about it with TV.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it with TV. So 30 years ago, 30 shows would have 20 million viewers a week. In 2000, only 2 shows had 20 million viewers a week, Friends and ER. Now, 0 shows.
None.
So will books, now there'll be more books than ever.
Hold on. Do you think TV is better now than it's ever been? And I'm counting Netflix and Amazon Prime.
Yes, I do think TV is better than it's ever been.
It's the best it's ever been, and it's only getting better. And I think books are going to follow the exact same path. But why is TV better? Because it's more niche now. Because
Yeah.
now my wife and I only watch things on Netflix together that we both love, and then she watches nurses shows because she's whatever a nurse, and then there's a few things that I like she doesn't like, right? And so I don't have to watch any garbage like Friends or whatever. I just watch things that I really am into. That's a better world, if you ask me. I think books are about to reach that, but what has to happen there? Somebody has to create the platform where it's really easy to create books, which is what we're trying to do, to make this a frictionless thing. The problem is you're thinking about books. Here's what's going to die. The notion that a book is this special thing that only select people are allowed to write. I mean, you've written the stuff against this for a long time. The idea that you got to get permission, the idea that like it's this event or whatever, I think that is dying. Absolutely. But what will replace it is that I think almost every serious professional in all fields are going to have, I don't want to say they're all going to have a book. What they're all going to have is a media presence that will show people who they are. If you think about it, how did people judge you before in the world? They judged you based on your credential, right? Well, if you went to Harvard, I guess that means you're smart. They were essentially outsourcing their assessment of you to the Harvard admission committee. That I think is all going to change. I think everyone's going to have their own media. So now they're going to be able to actually assess what you know and who you are and how you can help them in a sense.
So it's interesting. They're going to have to put more work in, right? Because they're going to have to understand who you are.
They're going to have to actually develop real
skills.
skills.
Right.
They're going to have to display those skills. But all that means there's a massive opportunity in business for companies that can help them display their skills and turn their skills into media. It doesn't have to be something complicated, man. Like, because that's the idea is that, this book is, the idea of a book for a lot of people is still the antiquated notion of opening a vein on a page that's 300, or opening a vein in 300 pages of beautiful prose. No, it can be 70 pages. Like, you're the best person in West Texas who understands exactly how to set pipes the right way in shale oil fields and blah, blah, blah. And so, like, you are the consultant for that. And you're the guy. And there's proof because you've done these 5 projects. You have this white paper or book type thing. And then here's this other thing that shows what you know. So every oil company that comes to shale fields in the Permian Basin, you're the guy they hire, right? Things like that. Or you want to be a life coach, but you're a life coach for CrossFit women who get pregnant but want to keep competing in CrossFit. So then you got to have your media to prove to them you are credible and you can teach them what they want, but every single one of those women come to you now.
So It's sort of like you always have to now. I think a prior way of thinking about media is I want to create something. I want to create Harry Potter. I want to create something that everybody reads.
Yes,
but
that's
now
gone. That's gone.
It's gone, and now you have to think about
your micro tribe.
Yeah, who's going to really. You have an idea or a vision that's kind of unique and maybe better than the vision before yours, and you're going to really service the needs of people who need that vision.
You need to think of, I like the term, I feel it was Seth Godin maybe who invented the term microtribe. I feel like that's the best concept that can help you understand, I think, what's coming. But the problem is like Kevin Kelly wrote the 1,000 True Fans article, which is a similar sort of idea. Kevin's talking about entertainers. Seth's talking about consultants. But at the end of the day, I think they're all going to end up not being the same thing, but looking very similar. Entertainer, what you're buying from them is you're buying escapism or enjoyment or laughter. From a consultant, you're buying knowledge or skills. But they're both knowledge workers. Like the idea that a comedian is fundamentally different than like a part-time CFO. It's not obvious to me that this is the same thing. Like it might be harder to be a comedian than a CFO. But I don't know. What if you're just funny to 5,000 people and that's it? You can make easily $150,000 a year doing that without any problem. It's about what a low-level CFO makes.
Right.
You know? Like, I mean, you're looking at the sort of the same thing. And so here's what's... In fact, hold on a minute. You're the dude 5 years ago or 10 years ago, whenever we first met, 7 years ago, who like your big spiel to me was, and this was kind of what became Choose Yourself, no one's going to work for companies anymore. Everyone's going to work for themselves. And in that world, Jay, and you know this is true. You're talking about this all the time, right? In a world where everyone's going to work for themselves, how is anyone going to get hired? How are you going to prove you should be hired at a contractor type job, right? You've got to have some credentials aren't going to work anymore. You've got to have proof. Show me you know how to do this. Show me you've done it and you know how. And so in that world where everyone's a contractor, then we have to almost develop a new sense of what media is. Media is not one to many. Media is micro to micro to convey important information. And everyone's got to have it. And they've got to be able to distribute it cheaply, which already exists, but then produce it cheaply. That doesn't exist right now.
And I think the skill of, always what's needed is the skill of coming up with something unique, having a vision that's a little bit ahead, but not too far ahead of what currently exists.
Right.
And that's a skill that's never going to go away, but it's necessary now as opposed to the Harvard degree. So the question is I'll ask you. So like you said, we met 7 years ago. I write every day for 7 years, and I bleed out the blood of my body. And I ask this to many people. I can't keep writing. You probably went through this yourself. I can't keep writing the same stories for 7 years. Yeah, I went broke and made.
You have other stories to tell you haven't told yet.
I have other stories to tell I haven't told yet. Which,
you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and they're amazing.
But I still wonder for myself, what's your next thing was, okay, I'm going to start this company. I've started a company. I started a podcast. You've had a couple of different iterations of starting companies and podcasts and ideas and so on. But it's a constant thing. Like reinvention is a habit almost. You have to develop.
Some people. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know, man. Yes, but you're anxious about it. I'm not so worried about it. I feel like. And you shouldn't be. It's just kind of how you are. You're just anxious about these things.
Are you calling me a neurotic Jew?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what I'm calling you. But dude, you have more opportunity than you have time for. You could easily be doing a lot more things than you are. So I wouldn't worry. The idea that everyone's gonna have to reinvent themselves all the time, I don't think is true. I think most people, as long as they are the very best at something relevant to a decent size, a micro tribe. As long as you stay in that position, I am the best at this, and that does require you to keep developing skills. It doesn't require reinvention,
I agree, but and this is the question I wonder. So, as you've seen, as we talked about, when you're good at something and you're doing well with it and getting attention and making money, other people kind of crowd into the space. Now they're not going to be as good as you, but you might, instead of being 500% better, eventually you might just be 50% better or 20% better. Now, the average kind of consumer of media or business or entertainment doesn't recognize the difference between 20% better and 20% worse.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to figure out again how to be 500% better.
Well, because you're talking about media as entertainment. Mm-hmm. Yes, for that, I think you're right. I think you've got to be a lot better to rise above the noise. I'm talking about being different, which is not the same thing as being better. Right? Everyone's trying to write everyone's trying to be the next James Altucher, right? But if your niche was scoped down that was only 5 or 10,000 people, no one would really care. It'd be too small. They all would all want to be big. And so what I'm trying to explain to you is that most of your audience are not people who are going to create media. Media is going to be the way they get business, not the business. Does that make sense? Right. For you, media is the business. That's the difference. So for you, yeah, I could see how it's a little bit of a stressful thing, but also it's not obvious to me that you have you were the first one into your niche, and everyone who comes after you now is oh, he's just a low rent James Altucher, so it's I it's sort of like with me or with how many people have tried to imitate Tim Ferriss or Malcolm Gladwell or whatever. Again, even in media, it's being not better, unique. You got to have a distinct voice. You got to say a certain set of things that no one else has said, or in a way no one else has said them. That is what I think is relevant. And you want to hear? I'll give you this super trick to being original. It's really simple. Tell the truth. In this world, no one ever tells the truth. And so if you're willing to tell the truth, that not oh, here's my hot take. No. I mean the fucking truth, the hard truth that everyone thinks and no one says. If you're willing to do that, people will think you're incredibly original. If you try to be original, it doesn't really work.
It's really interesting because I read I read an article this morning. A friend of mine sent me this article. She said, check it out. What do you think? And I didn't respond to her because it was an article, How to Survive a Breakup. And she published it on a big platform and so on. And I read it and it was all like, it was okay advice or whatever. But she didn't tell her story of a breakup that she's in that would have solidified her advice for me. Like it would have been a story and I could have gone on that ride with her to see that to test in my mind if this advice is working or not. And I think you're right. People are somehow afraid to just go a tiny bit deeper, to tell, which is again what you did with your writing. It wasn't just like some pickup book or whatever. You went like too deep, so that became entertaining. So, and now I see this with Book in a Box. It's sort of like you're getting your writers, not the writers, the clients to kind of go deep enough that it's relevant and interesting.
We're what we really,
JT is the CEO of your company, talks all about his pimp dad, and it's a great book. I loved it. It was a page turner.
He had an incredible life story. So we don't do a lot of memoirs. We won't take the memoir people for the most part because most of their life story, like they're just nonsense. Like, but the people who have dumb life stories don't generally can't afford us, so that's fine. No, most of our clients.
That's
come
an
to us.
interesting thing. Like, so if someone has kind of like a mediocre life story, they're not going to get wealthy. Is what you just said.
Well, because they don't have the self-awareness. Like people who are successful tend to be pretty self-aware. Not always. There's a lot that aren't, but there's a pretty high correlation, at least relative to the general population. So what we see, our stuff is all nonfiction so far. And our clients are people who are very successful for whom a book is gonna it's gonna be an all-purpose marketing tool for them. And so what we do, they all come in and they're all like, unconsciously, very few of them say this, but I think unconsciously they all want to be you, or they want to be Tim Ferriss, they want to be Malcolm Gladwell, right? And so like we have to like get them scoped down and then realize, okay, you can be James Altucher to wealth advisors in the Pacific Northwest. But just
so again,
them.
It's finding that niche.
Exactly. We help them find their micro tribe, and then the ones who resist that kind of write books that don't appeal to anyone because they try to appeal to everyone. They don't appeal to anyone. The ones who go with us and really listen to our advice niche down, and then all of a sudden, even if they only sell 1,000 books, they go to the exact right 1,000 people, and now they're flooded with business, and they are the experts in the space, and they're set up for 5 or 10 years. It happens over and over and over. The first client, the one you talked about, Melissa, pop-up retail. Her book is about pop-up retail. How many people do you think could possibly care about pop-up retail? There's like 5,000 people in America. She's done millions of dollars of business off of that book because those 5,000 people are decision makers, big businesses. They need these consultants to help them understand how to set up their pop-up retail stuff. So they all hire her now. Like she's consultants on these massive build-out like projects for huge retailers and property management companies and all these sort of things because everyone needed it. They didn't even know what they needed, and all she had to do. She hasn't been profiled in the New York Times. There's nothing about her in the New Yorker. She's in like the retail newsletter type things.
Okay, so this is an interesting question. So all of these media publications that have existed for 100 years, like the New Yorker or USA Today or whatever. Do you think we're seeing the downfall of them as we go into kind of this micro tribe world?
I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not. We're as humans, we're always going to want to have, sort of the thing that everyone knows about that we can talk about, which is why sports I think is so popular because it really is one of those things that cuts across almost all sort of boundaries and everyone has in common. I don't know. The media is. There's a lot of stuff going on with media. There's a lot of ideological conformity in media, which is going to create sort of a certain shift. And
already I feel there's like a backlash. After this last election, there's like a backlash against this sort of conformity in
the
media.
election was the backlash.
Right.
Like the election of Trump was the backlash against the intellectual homogeneity in media. I don't know, man. I don't know what's going to happen. I think media is going to be more, because so much of it is the same and they have the same worldview and so much of it is bankrupt and corrupt. And just not legitimate. I think they had a long period where they were kind of the standard bearers of truth, and I think that period's over. And so I think there is a massive opportunity for people to, I think media is going to niche too. in a different way. But I think like someone like the Young Turks, right? Like I don't really like them, but they're a great example of
Who are
somebody.
the Young Turks?
They're this huge YouTube show. They're sort of like imagine if MSNBC was done by millennials on a budget. I guess something like that. They're like ESPN. All of the massive media conglomerates, I think, are going to splinter, and the smart ones will essentially be platforms for lots of people like you to talk to smaller groups. You know, like you have a huge audience compared to most people, but compared to CNN, your audience doesn't exist, right? Well, what if CNN wasn't CNN? What if CNN was essentially a production and reporting platform for 40 different people who had different ideological worldviews and voices, like Glenn Beck or whatever, but totally all different across the spectrum, right? All different types of people. What if that's all CNN was? Is like recording studios, production, basic on the ground reporting, et cetera, et cetera. They just set up the platform and then they did the ad sales, but the talent had their own sort of thing and they developed their own audiences, et cetera, right? That, I think, is the way the world is going because the world is bifurcating, man. Like, the idea that we all think and believe the same thing is gone. Like, that's gone, and we're never going back to that period. That was a very weird moment in time, and I think we're going to break back up into sort of tribal units. And I don't mean like some kooky anarchist Mad Max thing, although it would not shock me to see America disarticulate in a way. Like, it would not shock me to see over the next 20 years like almost like a European model. Like we'll have a hollow national sort of like a government and like a military whatever. But I think this Trump election was the first crack that we're going to see. Because here's the thing, people don't have to be in big groups anymore. You don't have to get bad service and marginalization from huge groups anymore. You can just have your own tribe of people that you think alike and believe the same things and can serve you and you can serve them. You can have that now. And I think that's the way the world's going.
It's interesting because this philosophy is kind of coming out of how you were essentially treated by media out of your books. Like they didn't treat you seriously. Instead, like National Book Award winners sell 2,000 copies of their books.
I know.
You sold 2 million copies of your books and nobody would.
3
million copies of your books and nobody would have you on there.
None of that media would take me seriously.
Right.
But I had 3 million people buying my books. Right? So like, that's the thing is I feel like we're going into the world in all ways. I think is a world of microtribes, and I think it's going to be for the better in a lot of ways. Now, it could be worse in a lot because, like, if everyone, the extreme of that is balkanization, right? Is what you got like after the fall of the Soviet Union in sort of Eastern Europe. I don't know, man. I think we'll probably go through that phase, but I think we're going to come out, and I think it's going to be way, way better.
So, given all this, what are books people should read to kind of get ready for the new world?
Oh man, I don't know. It's a good question. Like not even trying to pimp your own stuff, but the sort of Choose Yourself series. I have not read your newest one yet, but like those are a great sort of how-to guide to understand what's coming and what to do. Basically, everyone's going to work for themselves.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And of course, you wrote the books on it, right? And so, like, if you understand what that means is that if everyone's going to work for themselves, then you need to really take charge of your career. Even if you're still working for a company now, take charge of your career, develop skills, and then
and that's important. Like, not everyone's going to be the CEO of a business, as you've demonstrated, but you can be in your company and still have a unique voice and make your services and skills necessary within that company.
Yep. Yeah. The world is going to change in really exponential ways, and no one's really prepared. Like VR and AI and like driverless cars and all these sorts of things are going to change the way. This won't be a linear change. We're going to see massive exponential changes to the world, and I think people should start thinking about that now. You're okay for now if you don't understand that, but even 2 years from now, you're going to be way behind if you're not at least thinking about this in your own career and developing skills about how to prepare for this. The big thing I would really think about, anything that's going to help you develop sets of skill. Here's the big thing: emotional intelligence. One of the big changes, our entire school industrial complex is geared around teaching the high status jobs are information processing jobs. Those are all done. Doctors, done.
Well, anything, and it's funny because I had
lawyers, done.
Anything where you require human intelligence to make an important decision, we now have computers and data
For
to help
information
us make
processing decision. All doctors is a memory device for pattern recognition, right? AI is going to take that job.
Right.
And so, but AI, robots won't be doing medical care. That's nonsense. Who's going to actually implement the care? Nurses and other people who are really great at emotional intelligence, at dealing with people, right? So what we call soft skills now.
But you know what's really funny? Like, I think about myself. I think I'm actually at the least emotionally intelligent point of my life in a weird way.
Why?
I just feel like I don't know. I feel like I've read a lot about it. I go to therapy. I do, for years and years, I write about my vulnerabilities. And I think maybe just writing about that, I realize I have more vulnerabilities than I've ever had before. So
no, you always it's not like you're writing about them as making them up, dude.
Right.
You just don't recognize.
That's just it. But now I'm just recognizing them more than ever.
That's not a bad thing. Why is that a bad thing?
It's not necessarily a bad thing. I guess it's just more things that make me anxious in life. So, I've added to my neuroses when I wake up in the morning. We all wake up with like a certain set of neuroses, and then we kind of like knock them down as we get out of bed. But I don't.
You know the saying, when you're going through hell, keep going.
Yeah, right.
You come out the other end, dude. I mean, like, yeah, dude. I mean, that it always, for me, first of all, everything in life goes in cycles. And for me, it always feels like the hardest part is always right before the best part. It's almost always the way it works, man. Like, I can't tell you how hard it was for me to navigate the emotional sort of waters of recognizing that I had hired the wrong person to run my company, that it was my fault. It really was. And swallowing that, and then swallowing that because of that, I needed to put the right, and I had the right person in my orbit, and I had to get him in my company, and I had to step aside for him because I wasn't good enough to do that job. And like CEO of a startup, high status job, like, to be the founder and to step down was like, now everyone's like, oh, that's so great, whatever, good for you for recognizing it. It did not feel like that in the moment, man. That felt like what you're talking about, where it just felt like 100 times worse. Where I'm like, oh my God, I went through all this work, and then how did I get back in this spot, And I'm sure something like this will happen again in my life. No, but that's the thing. That's the thing, is that the same thing happened, right? The same thing that happened that screwed up my movie happened in my company. This time, I recognized it early enough to see what I was doing and make the right decision.
I think also the stakes were higher. You had employees, you had partners. I mean, you kind of had that then with the movie, but the movie is a one-off. Whereas this was something you wanted. It was a vision you had that you felt that you think is going to last forever and grow and build.
For me personally, I'm telling you, the stakes were much higher on the movie. I had my identity tied to that movie. That movie. It's funny, man. I say this to people sometimes. If that movie had succeeded, it actually would have ended up being the worst thing that ever happened to me. I never would have changed again in my life. I would have been frozen in time at that moment. Like, you never would have been able to tell me anything else the rest of my life, because like I would have thought it would have been locked in my unconscious at a deep level that I couldn't be wrong. And haven't you met those people who had like a huge success early and they never changed? They never really evolved after that?
Oh yeah, or if they had huge success, let's say 20 years ago, and forgot what it was like to not have success. So it's been 20 years of...
Well, they haven't done anything different.
Right.
Like they just keep not even writing that. It's just like the problem happens is that
I mean, I've seen a lot of people from like the 90s who were kind of, let's say, same category as me, like internet entrepreneur, and then they kind of made their 100 million and kept going, and now they've had 20 years of 100 million.
Right.
Now they're never wrong, and they're impenetrable as far as having a conversation with them.
There you go. Exactly. That's what I could have been one of those people. And I was so close. And like, I'm never going to be like, oh, I'm super happy my movie failed. It was so painful. It was the worst. That was the most physically, not just emotionally. It was one of the most, I'll never forget, man. Like the night that, I think it was my birthday, I swear to God, the night that I knew the movie was a failure, like I sat in my bed and I cried. Like it was physical. I thought I was going to die physically. Like it was like a James Altucher post, you know? Like it was like,
You guys, what I'm saying, you gotta write this book.
no, man, I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready. Like I'm not ready.
I'm gonna quote you on you giving me advice. You will die as an artist if you don't eventually write this book.
You're right. Well, all right. Well, you know what I said this to you about something. I won't bring up in the podcast because this is gonna be your thing. You're gonna have to bring up on your own. I'll make you a promise that I'll write that book if you promise me you'll write the one that I was talking about.
All right, deal.
Good.
So Tucker Max, thanks once again for this is like your 5th appearance on the podcast.
Fourth,
Like your
yeah.
4th or 5th. And thanks again for coming on the show.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
For more from James, check out The James Altucher Show on the Choose Yourself Network at jamesaltucher.com and get yourself on the free Insiders list today.
If you want to make sure you never miss an episode, and we have some great episodes coming up, subscribe to The James Altucher Show. Just go to iTunes, search for The James Altucher Show, and click subscribe. Thank you so much. I really hope you do this.
AI might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry and literally billions of dollars are being invested. So buckle up. The problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power, so how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? It's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI. OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, offers one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing, and of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds. If you want to do more and spend less, like Uber, 8x8, and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/advance. That's oracle.com/advance. oracle.com/advance.